This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
The UN warns of a humanitarian crisis in Madagascar amid drought and COVID-19 pandemic. Uganda gears up for presidential election on Thursday. And a look at rising insecurity in Beni region of the eastern DR Congo. Hello and thank you for joining us on Africa Live. I am Peninah Karibe, also lined up this hour. Egypt Air plans to resume flights to Qatar as a 3-year Gulf dispute ends. And in sports, South African striker Dinon Ndlovu relishing life in China League One side Zhejiang Greentown. A civil society organization in the Democratic Republic of Congo says more than 1,200 civilians in the eastern territory of Beni have been killed by a militia known as the Allied Democratic Forces since 2019. The revelation comes a day after suspected ADF rebels raided the town of Mwenda in Beni and killed 1 soldier. For more on this, let's cross to CGTN Chris Ochamringa in Kinshasa. Chris, can you give us more details on these reports?
Yeah, so this report was released by a group known as Lucha, which stands for Lutte pour le Changement, which means the fight for change. It's a group of young people that was originally from the eastern city of Goma that has been advocating, for a change in the democracy of the country, human rights, and an end to the fighting in the east of the country. So they said that they have, documented 1,200 killings of civilians in Beni territory in the east of the DRC since 2019. The group has been very disappointed with the Congolese army for failing to protect civilians. They're saying the number of attacks that the army has been carrying out against this militia group has not, succeeded in ending these killings of civilians in their areas who are, trying to eke out a living. They have been very disappointed with the government and we're calling on them to do much more to bring an end to this fighting. Now, this report by Lucha came on the same day that another attack, was carried out in Beni territory, an area known as Mwenda. 1 soldier was killed and 3 others were injured. And the Congolese government forces said, they were pursuing the rebels and discovered a mass grave of 50 civilians and an area known as Lose Lose. And that is, is a very big number of people. So people in Beni territory have been dying on almost a daily basis, and they've been calling on the government to do much more, to end this fighting. Peninah?
Chris, what's behind the latest spate of attacks there in Beni?
It's still not very clear what, the reason of this attack was, but according to a security analyst I spoke to, he said that, the Congolese government troops started carrying out a large-scale military offensive against the Allied Democratic Forces at the end in October 2019. And ever since that offensive happened, killings against civilians have increased across Beni territory. They're saying one reason is that, some of the civilians in that area have been collaborating with the government troops, revealing the hideout of these rebels. And so the rebels have been going out to kill the people. And the killings are very brutal. There have been international monitoring organizations that say the Allied Democratic Forces, which is known as the ADF, is one of the notorious groups. They kill people with machetes, burn homes, and, carry out very brutal killings. So people in that area are really helpless. Last year, there was a very large protest against the United Nations peacekeeping mission, whose mandate is to protect civilians. People in Beni were complaining that the UN has more sophisticated weapons and better logistics, to help protect them against these attacks, and they were very disappointed. I spoke to the spokesperson of MONUSCO here in Kinshasa, and he said that the nature of these attacks by the Allied Democratic Forces is very complex. These are people who are farmers by day, and then they become rebels at night. They're people who live within the communities, so it's very difficult to distinguish them from fighters. It's not a conventional war, and so they need the support and the government forces to be able to protect civilians. Peninah?
Okay, so Chris, that is MONUSCO's response to your question, but I'm curious about the government itself. Why is it seemingly unable to secure these areas?
Well, the government has said that they have stepped up the offensive against the Allied Democratic Forces. Since 2019, like I earlier mentioned, President Felix Tshisekedi ordered the army, to have a base in Beni so that they can coordinate these attacks. And these attacks have been going on against the rebels, but then the killings have also been going because the rebels, the ADF rebels, carry out guerrilla operations. It's not a conventional warfare. And so the government they're saying that they're trying their best, to try and get rid of this rebel group, but they have failed so far, and the people want answers, and they want them really fast.
Understandably, Chris, thank you very much for that update. Chris Ochambringa live in Kinshasa. Now let's go to Madagascar, where severe malnutrition rates continue to worsen due to drought and the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. The World Food Programme says children have been forced to beg in order to supplement their families' food rations. The WFP warned that a looming humanitarian crisis could leave a third of the population struggling to put food on the table. Here's CGTN's Joy Kiruki with more.
The situation in southern Madagascar, triggered by a 3-year-long drought. Many, like Ikemba, have been forced to trek for miles in search of food and water.
We still have some of these leaves. When I can't go begging in the neighboring village, we have to dig under this sand without being sure to find anything. Yesterday and today, I couldn't go because I feel very weak. When we don't find anything under the sand, we drink the seawater. It is bad for our health, but we have no choice because otherwise we would have nothing in our tummy.
The COVID-19 pandemic has brought about a sharp recession. Many are forced to sit by and wait for food donations. Donations are sometimes far between.
We are so poor that we have nothing to eat because of the drought. There's nothing we can do.
According to the World Food Programme, children are the worst affected. Many have dropped out of school to beg for food. WFP is currently providing food assistance to nearly 500,000 people in the 9 hardest hit districts in the south.
The number of severely food insecure as well as severely acute malnourished children is increasing as we speak. We need funding and we need resources for the World Food Programme to be able to augment the response and the capacities down in the Grand Sud of Madagascar.
A plea for assistance that is hoped will ease the dire situation in South Madagascar. Joy Kiruki Juma, CGTN.
Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni has called on members of the public to come out and vote ahead of Thursday's election. Museveni, while addressing the nation on Tuesday, assured voters of their safety and warned anyone against rigging the election. Museveni, one of Africa's longest-serving leaders, is pitted against opposition frontrunner Bobi Wine for the presidency. The campaign period was marred with brutal crackdowns on opposition rallies. Authorities defended their actions, saying the rallies were breaking COVID-19 regulations on large gatherings. Rights groups, on the other hand, have termed the restrictions as a pretext to muzzle the opposition. Ugandan authorities are also accused of having banned social media use 2 days before the election.
I call upon all registered voters to come out and vote. There have been practices of intimidation where especially the opposition people have been threatening people not to come out and vote. In some areas, they have even attacked peaceful citizens. I held a meeting with the security forces. They are ready to defend you. Therefore, don't fear anything. Come out and vote. Nobody will intimidate you. Nobody will attack you. If anybody tries to do that, we shall get him or her. I'm glad the Electoral Commission has finally brought a system which is foolproof This is the one where you can only vote if you show your fingerprint and do not cheat. So to have got a clean and stable country where the vote matters, where the vote is respected and the wielders of the vote are respected and therefore served by those they elect. I thank you and I wish you good luck.
Meanwhile, Ugandans have been leaving the capital city, Kampala, ahead of the Thursday election. Many have expressed fears of possible violence.
Yeah, according to the past elections, we've always had chaos within Kampala, around Kampala. And I think this time, with a lot of pressure that we have right now, there might be a lot of violence after. And this time around, we hope there might be change. We hope.
But since this campaign is happening, everyone is worried.
Leaders from the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, have expressed confidence in Mali returning to official civilian rule. ECOWAS has been mediating in Mali's transitional period since the ouster of former President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta. Top ECOWAS mediator and former Nigerian President Goodluck Jonathan visited the country this week. He was expected to meet with political and civil society figures. His visit comes as the country awaits constitutional reform and national elections to be held. After Keïta's overthrow in August, ECOWAS stepped in and levied trade and financial embargoes on Mali. These were later withdrawn after the army handed over power to a civilian interim government meant to rule for 18 months before democratic elections.
We believe that the transitional government will be able to conclude everything they are set out to do within the 18 months. And he did mention that they are committed to conducting elections before the end of the 18 months. For now, we have no reason to doubt that.
The Ethiopian National Defense Forces have announced the arrest of at least 9 top officials from the Tigray People's Liberation Front. Arrests include the former president of the region, Abiy Waldu, and the country's former Minister of the Economy, Abraham Tekeste, who was also the deputy president of the region. The arrested TPLF leaders have been brought to the capital, Addis Ababa. The government said those arrested will soon appear in court to face charges which include terrorism and treason. These latest arrests are in addition to those made a few days back, which included the group's founder.
After a long time and hard work, our army is finally capturing the rebel orchestrators, hunting them out from their hideouts, and we will continue our work until the rest of them are fully apprehended.
It's 13 minutes into the hour. You're watching Africa Live. Let's take a short break. Coming up. South Africa closes land borders amid UK travel ban. And China's Hebei puts cities on lockdown and evacuates villages as part of efforts to control a COVID-19 outbreak.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo, Juba, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Let's Let's head over to Malawi, where President Lazarus Chakwera is calling on the international community, relevant UN agencies and NGOs to assist the country's fight against COVID-19. Chakwera declared a state of national disaster accompanied by a 3-day national mourning period to remember those who have died due to the pandemic. The announcement was made after 2 high-ranking government officials, Linkson Belekanyama and Muhammad Siddiq Mir, died from the virus. Belekanyama and Mir were serving as Malawi's Ministers of Local Government and Transport, respectively. South Africa has closed its land borders until the 15th of February due to concerns surrounding the increase in COVID-19 cases. The surge appears to be due to a variant of the virus identified in South Africa. This comes as travel restrictions in the United Kingdom continue, banning South African citizens from direct entry. The restrictions extended to several other countries in the region are already in effect and will remain in place for at least 2 weeks. CGTN's Yolisan Jamila has more.
The move aims to prevent the South African variant of the coronavirus from spreading to the United Kingdom. The UK government has extended the ban to those who have travelled from or through any Southern African country, including Namibia, Zimbabwe, Botswana, Eswatini, Zambia, Malawi, Lesotho, Mozambique, Angola, Seychelles and Mauritius. Recently, South African authorities confirmed that a new, faster-spreading variant of the virus had been detected here and is driving the second wave of the pandemic. Britain is among the countries worst hit by COVID-19. In a statement, the British government says it is responding swiftly to new evidence showing an urgent need to halt travel from all Southern African countries. This in a bid to help prevent the spread of the new COVID-19 variant identified here in South Africa. The UK had previously temporarily banned entry of passengers arriving from South Africa from December 24 last year. An aviation analyst says that while the steps taken are necessary, they are a major blow to many airlines.
If you look at the Virgin Atlantic, British Airways, those are the most affected airlines that are going to be having to transfer the passengers from their own airline to the different airlines like your KLM, Air France. And those are the ones that are mainly affected. And obviously, their cargo as well. It's been a serious blow for them, and therefore they are going to be experiencing quite a lot of losses as far as revenue is concerned.
Mujapili says while these travel bans are well-intentioned and are in place to curb the spread of the virus, they might not be entirely effective.
I think the British government, they have jumped the gun because they do not have a total control of the influx of the people that are coming out of South Africa. You can get into UK as long as you don't have a direct ticket coming out of South Africa. You can go to France and get to the UK via the train. You can get to Amsterdam, Netherlands, and get into the UK.
The travel ban does not include British and Irish nationals, longer-term visa holders, and permanent residents. The British government also announced that the measures will be in place initially for 2 weeks and will be continuously reviewed. The South African Tourism Department says while the ban has adversely affected business and tourism travel, it was always expected, not only as a result of the second wave of the pandemic here, but also due to restrictions in other countries. Yolisan Jamila for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
In Senegal, the country is also facing a second wave of the coronavirus pandemic. Hospitals across the capital, Dakar, are dealing with a surge of COVID-19 patients. Astatal has more.
As Day Jan and Professor Musa Saidi don their protective gear, they get ready for another day of rounds at Fan Hospital. Located in Dakar, the hospital has been among the hardest hit by the country's second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. While they maintain a calm demeanor as a checkup on COVID-19 patients, Nurse Diane is concerned by the surge in cases.
We can say that we're a bit worried because we are here every day. We can say that sometimes there's fear and panic. We are more concerned for our families than ourselves, because here we can take the proper measures, but once we are home, we are afraid to infect our families, especially our children.
Since March, Senegal seemed to have a handle on containing the virus. Now, a lack of capacity has left doctors only able to admit severe cases. Professor Seydi understands this problem firsthand.
We have a meeting with the hospital director to open 10 fully equipped beds with all that is needed. We can even do reanimation. So the system is moving. It's being reactivated. Sometimes there is a rush in the numbers of patients. That increases much faster than the number of beds. We are trying to adapt. That's what needs to be done during a pandemic. That's what everyone is doing.
The surge in cases has led to President Macky Sall reimposing a curfew in Dakar and Thiès. The two urban regions account for 90% of the country's cases. Hopes now turn to the COVID-19 vaccines, though storage remains a major issue.
We have the necessary equipment centrally as well as regionally to store vaccines at temperatures between 2 degrees and 8 degrees Celsius. Now, if the choice leans towards RAM vaccines that need to be stored in very low temperatures between -70 and -80 degrees Celsius, the country doesn't have the equipment available for storage.
As the country awaits the vaccines, hospitals continue to try to build their capacity to fight the virus. Astatal, CGTN.
The Chinese mainland reported 107 new coronavirus infections on Tuesday. 8 are imported cases registered in 3 provinces. The rest are domestic transmissions, including 16 in Heilongjiang province, 1 in Shanxi, and 90 in Hebei province. Hebei is facing the worst outbreak in China in months. 3 cities in northern China's Hebei province, which surround Beijing, are on lockdown. Authorities have evacuated thousands of villagers to alternative accommodations in order to disinfect their area. Our correspondent Ning Hong in Shijiazhuang has more.
The downtown area of Shijiazhuang City, and it used to be a very crowded and noisy and a very populated place, but now you can see the shopping mall behind me is one of the biggest shopping malls in the city, and just 2 days ago, one confirmed COVID-19 cases was found there, so it is now a medium level risk area, and people are all in quarantine, so you can see the picture of the city. And in the meantime, we just learned that this morning that people from what we believe the center of this outbreak, one of the villages called Xiaoguozhuang village, and along with other 12 villages, people from there was evacuated. Roughly about 20,000 people were evacuated starting from yesterday, and we've seen that people uploaded videos to the internet, and people are lining up, carrying their luggages and waiting to get on buses, and the buses will take them, taking them to hotels, to places, sometimes some even schools nearby around the city, and because there are 12 districts and county in the city. We still don't know how many places they've arranged for these people, but it is said that there are over 100 places, hotels, including hotels, to accommodate these 20,000 people or even more. So now the village of Xiaoguozhuang is literally empty.
In the city of Qixie in East China's Shandong province, rescue efforts continue at the site of a gold mine explosion. The accident on Sunday trapped 22 workers underground. Our reporter Huang Yue has more from the site.
It's been over 70 hours since an explosion tore through the gold mine, and 22 workers are still trapped underground. Rescuers still cannot get contact with them because the communication signal has been damaged in the blast. You know, right now at the site, you can see many people. Actually, it's over 300 people, including rescuers and medical workers and firefighters. They're here here working around the clock, try to search for the trapped workers. And as you can see beside me, there is a drilling machine. It's trying to drill the hole beside the main well because they try to deliver some food and water through that hole downside to the trapped workers. And also, as of 4 p.m. yesterday, the drill pipe has reached a depth of over 360 meters to ventilate the shaft and remove noxious gases and smoke. And the sound monitoring equipment has reached a depth of 370 meters downside to detect if there's any sound from the trapped workers. And rescuers have also been lowered to the damaged shafts to clear the obstacles and try to contact the trapped workers.
Now, the U.S. House of Representatives has voted to pass a resolution urging Vice President Mike Pence to remove Trump. It calls on Pence to invoke constitutional powers to oust the president. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi released a letter from the Vice President ahead of the vote, saying Pence will reject calls for him to remove Trump. Pelosi told Pence last week if he does not move against the president, the lawmakers will begin the process on Trump. The House is set to vote on President Trump's impeachment Wednesday night. Stay tuned to CGTN for the latest. Meanwhile, President-elect Joe Biden's inauguration is just a week away. Washington is ramping up security after riots at the Capitol last week and due to fears of more protests at the inauguration. Jagroti Davi reports from Washington, D.C.
Washington, D.C. is a city on high alert. Ever since those riots last week, we have had an increased law enforcement presence in the city, increased security. There was a 7-foot fence erected around the Capitol. There have been barricades. There's been National Guard members stationed at strategic locations because the FBI has been warning that there are likely, there's a great strong possibility that there will be more such crowds and protests happening in the lead up to the inauguration, not just in Washington, D.C., but in every single state in the country. So there are other states like Wisconsin that are also on high alert in preparation for potential violent unrest. Now, we know that 1,000 National Guard members are pouring into Washington, D.C. To support local law enforcement ahead of the inauguration. The Army Secretary, according to reports, is saying that a lot of those National Guard members are going to be armed. There's going to be no public access to the Capitol grounds during the inauguration, acting Chief of Capitol Police. And meanwhile, behind all of this, investigations are underway to track down those who were involved in those protests on Wednesday of last week, which really have set all of this in motion.
And coming up in business news, Egypt Air plans to resume flights to Qatar as a 3-year Gulf dispute ends. And we'll tell you why Côte d'Ivoire farmers are selling their beans below the guaranteed farm gate price.
Taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Over the last 14 hours of rain.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Egypt has reopened its airspace to Qatari flights. According to officials, a Qatar Airways plane is due to land in Cairo this Friday. It will be the first commercial flight between the two countries since Egypt joined Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain in a boycott of Qatar in 2017. Egypt and its Gulf allies imposed the embargo on Qatar over allegations that it supports Islamic extremists and keeps close ties to Iran. Doha has denied the allegations. After 3 years of severed diplomatic and economic ties, the four boycotting countries signed a declaration with Qatar at an annual summit last week to end the dispute. A pandemic-induced slowdown in global chocolate demand has led to a pile-up of about 100,000 tons of beans in the world's top cocoa producer. As CGTN's Wanja Mungai reports, farmers in Cote d'Ivoire are now selling their beans below the guaranteed farm gate price so as to reduce stocks and piling up in their farm warehouses.
With few shipments leaving the world's top cocoa producer, unwanted stockpile are adding to a growing store of beans at ports. It's estimated that about 100,000 tons of beans are stuck at farms and cooperatives. That's roughly 1/3 of Cote d'Ivoire's monthly output at this time of the year. Cocoa arrivals at Cote d'Ivoire's two main ports from October 1st to December 27 were down 3.3% compared with the same period a year ago.
I'm scared now. I don't know if the price will go down because the buyers are not buying from us. I'm scared that my cocoa will remain in my hands since I can't find any other solution.
The delays are being felt keenly by farmers and traders who are struggling to sell their beans at the fixed minimum of 1,000 Central African francs. That's about $2 per kilogram.
We have problems selling our cocoa. We have problems because the buyers that come here say they can't pay us 1,000 CFA francs and sell it back to the Lebanese buyers at 1,000 CFA francs per kilo. It's not profitable for us, so we try to find ways to sell it in town.
The real problem today is cash. We have problems with farmers and weighing at the farm because they refuse to give sales deposits. But given that we have cash problems on the field, you will find a lot of cocoa with farmers. Even at the store, it's more or less the same thing. People go to the factory, but the unloading is very difficult. Yesterday I sent 2 trailers, and today those trailers are still over there and they have not been unloaded.
Leading chocolate makers agreed to a proposal from the African nations in 2019 to charge the industry a premium for cocoa beans and guarantee a minimum income to farmers who earn just $1 a day. The scheme, however, which came into effect last October, was based on expectations that international cocoa prices would stay within average ranges. Instead, the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on demand has driven them to their lowest in nearly 2 years, and they are expected to stay weak for at least until the end of the year. Wanjamungai, CGTN.
Let's turn to other commodities in Zimbabwe, where the country is focusing on growing its battered manufacturing sector in 2021 as output from the agricultural sector rises. The government's economic blueprint plans to support the production and processing of crops like cotton, soya beans and livestock hides, among others. From Harare, here's CGTN's Frame Okutoya.
Samuneti Leather makes handbags, belts and wallets using cattle, goat, ostrich, elephant and crocodile hides. Because its products are meant to last at least 20 years, a consistent stock of quality raw materials as well as linkages with suppliers are crucial.
We have annual general meetings within the sector where we check ourselves to see who is producing, at what level are they producing, and where demand is more, the manufacturers can easily hint in advance to say, I think we'll be having so much demand next year. Could you also increase your production at the production level of at the farming level of these sources of exotic skins?
They start off as individual strips, bits and pieces before they are all put together to become the product available in different shops all over the world. It's this sort of cohesion that government wants to see in key sectors of the economy, where the different stages of production are brought together to work cohesively to improve efficiency, increase production and achieve economic growth. Zimbabwe's National Development Strategy aims to fortify linkages between industry and the mainstay agricultural sector, which were disrupted after the land reform program and subsequent economic deterioration. The strategy seeks to transform the economy from primary production by encouraging investment in value addition, which should also lead to import substitution and export promotion. It's targeting an average 5% GDP growth per annum.
And in 2025, the anticipation that the agricultural sector as an economy should be $80.2 billion, right? The mining sector as an economy in 2025 should be $12 billion economy, right? Then the manufacturing sector as an economy should be $80 billion. So these are kind of indicative sizes of the economies which are coming on the back of strengthening of value chains.
Samuneti has taken a hit due to the COVID-19 pandemic and is operating at just 20% of capacity. It's hopeful that a rebound in tourism, as well as the government's thrust towards production, will help it ramp up activity to previous levels before the end of the year. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
South Africa will not be going to a higher COVID-19 lockdown level. President Cyril Ramaphosa says the adjusted level 3 lockdown will continue. While some in the country have welcomed the move, those in the restaurant industry are pleading for leniency. As CGTN's Shonela Lupuwana now explores.
Speaking to the country in a televised address on January 11th, President Cyril Ramaphosa announced that South Africa's level 3 restrictions would remain in place.
The hours of curfew will now start at 9 p.m. and end earlier at 5 a.m. It remains compulsory for all of us, every person in our country, to wear a mask in a public space. Since New Year's Day, we have recorded nearly 190,000 new coronavirus infections. The country has recorded more than 4,600 COVID-19 deaths so far this year.
Some have welcomed the decision to remain at level 3 lockdown. For one sector, however, it could be its death knell. Being unable to serve alcohol and having to close by 9 p.m., restaurant owners and workers in South Africa are torn between the necessity to combat the pandemic and the need to sustain their own livelihoods.
Now things are bad for me just because of the first lockdown. So even if he can announce again for another lockdown, things would be worse.
It's already impacted business a lot with even it being level 3. But it's not something that we look forward to. It means a lot of job loss in the hospitality industry. We won't even know where we stand with our shop here at Parkhurst, so it's quite scary.
Since the lockdown was imposed last year, thousands have lost their jobs. Restaurant owners and associations across Africa's most industrialized economy have been pleading for leniency since the start of the outbreak.
We still have hope things are going to change, although it all depends on how people handle themselves and how people are taking this whole COVID thing. Because the reason why we have a hard lockdown is because of the numbers that are surging every day. So that will mean people will lose jobs either, everyone, including me. Yeah, that will be sad news.
South Africa has seen over 1.2 million confirmed cases since the virus arrived in March last year. That's the most on the African continent. The country is also battling with a new coronavirus variant which began in December. The new variant is different from the new strain that scientists have been studying in the UK. Both the new South African and the UK variant appear to be more contagious. Shonela Lupuwana, CGTN.
To the US now, and government officials say they have begun collecting increased tariffs on certain European Union products after failing to resolve a 16-year-old trade dispute with the EU. The long-running disagreement is over government subsidies to aircraft manufacturers Airbus and Boeing. The World Trade Organization ruled in separate cases against both Europe's Airbus and the US's Boeing. The WTO granted Washington and Brussels permission to impose billions of dollars in tariffs on each other's goods goods. The US has now placed an additional 15% tariff on aircraft parts and up to 25% on certain wines and brandy from France and Germany. The EU has not indicated if it will follow the US lead and impose its own duties. Natalie Carney has more from Munich.
It's been 16 years of tit-for-tat tariffs between the traditional allies. The most recent, which goes into effect on Tuesday, will see European aircraft manufacturing parts and drinks from both Germany and France with an alcohol content above 14% hit by a 25% U.S. import fee. Alcoholic beverages below 14% have faced a similar tariff since November of 2019. Since then, German wine exports to the U.S. have seen revenues drop by 21%, or 55 million euros.
The amount of exports has decreased by 7%, but is still 155,000 hectolitres. These are large amounts for Germany, a comparatively small production and export country. Overall, we produce or export around 1 million hectolitres.
France, where more higher alcohol content beverages are produced, will likely be hit harder by these latest sanctions.
For us, this has a direct impact on the purchasing price. It is increased by 25%, so it requires discussions with our importers, and then very often a distribution of the weight of this tax between the different stakeholders, the importer, us, and the final consumer, who will also pay a part of this price.
Yet this dispute has nothing to do with wine.
The issue is over subsidies the EU, namely Germany, France, Spain, and at the time England, paid to the European plane manufacturer Airbus versus those paid by the US to rival Boeing based out of Seattle. Both Washington and Brussels believe that the other is providing an unfair advantage.
In November, the EU placed levies on 3 billion euros worth of American goods, such as tractors, ketchup, and orange juice, in response to U.S. tariffs a year earlier. Yet the U.S. trade representative argued that the tariffs were improperly calculated, therefore resulting in this latest move. The EU is hopeful that relations with the U.S. on this matter will improve under the Biden administration and has offered to drop all tariffs if the U.S. reciprocates.
So we call on the US to agree that both sides drop existing countermeasures with immediate effect so that we can quickly put this issue behind us. Removing these tariffs would represent a strong win-win for both sides. We now have an opportunity to reboot our transatlantic cooperation and work together towards our shared goals.
Meanwhile, increasing tariffs are forcing German winemakers to look for alternative markets.
Scandinavia is currently a growing export market, but China is also a stable export market despite the coronavirus pandemic. China is the 5th most important export market for German winemakers, so we are quite satisfied with that and actually see further potential there.
Natalie Carney, CGTN, in Munich.
You're watching Africa Live. We've got plenty more coming up after the break, including this. Hundreds of dead fish wash up on Lake Victoria shores.
Join us in global business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Peninah, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival, and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Hundreds of dead fish have washed up ashore at Uganda's Lake Victoria without a clear cause. Fishermen in the area are worried the reason behind the mysterious deaths could also affect their livelihoods, as well as the safety of children that swim in the water.
This is not an unusual sight for fishermen on Lake Victoria. Uganda's Ministry of Agriculture says a lack of oxygen is possibly the reason for the tons of dead fish. A ministry statement says recent storms on the lakes could have caused mixing of different waters, reducing the oxygen levels in Lake Victoria as a result. However, residents in the area say the death rate this time round is much higher than in the past.
Some people say the lake froze at the bottom, which is causing the fish to freeze to death. Most of us don't know why. Some people eat them and nothing happens to them. We tell them it could be poisonous. But it does not appear to be so, because if it were poisonous, they would be dead by now.
We have faced a lot of difficulty. I'm a fishmonger. I fish, I have boats, and I also do wholesale. The problem we're currently facing is the dying fish. We're in a panic. We do not know why Nile perch are dying, yet all of the other fish are not dying. A lot of the Nile perch have died.
Experts have a different theory on the incident. They say years of pollution are now threatening the lake, as well as the lives of those who reside in the area.
Lake Victoria, to begin with, faces a lot of stressors emanating from waste that comes from industries, that comes from settlements, but also poison or chemicals that come from the farms, especially agrochemicals, but also chemicals that also come from the industries. We have also had watershed degradation around Lake Victoria. All these stressors are affecting the lake. They are also affecting the over 3 million livelihoods that depend on this resource.
The lake has become very polluted. That may also be one of the causes. Our children swim in the water sometimes. Mostly the young ones go swimming without their parents' knowledge. Now we fear that the water they swim in is what is killing the fish, and we don't know the cause. We do not know how hard it's going to become and where we will end up.
Yet, what remains puzzling is that the Nile perch is the only species being affected by the phenomenon, leading the Ministry of Agriculture to rule out poisoning. Further investigations are being carried out into the definitive reason behind the deaths. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
Coming up in sports. South African striker Dino Ndlovu relishing life in China League One side Zhejiang Greentown.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Dino Ndlovu is reportedly one of the highest paid South African footballers in the world after deciding to ply his trade abroad and forge a career out of his comfort zone. Now, the Zhejiang Greentown striker in China League One is urging other local players to follow in his footsteps and expand their horizons. CGTN CS Duplessis has more.
2020 has been an incredibly tough year for everyone. You've been literally in the epicenter of where they first detected COVID. How difficult was it being a player based overseas with everything that was going on?
40% of my team is there from Wuhan. I could, feel and see the outrage, the pain they have in their eyes when, we were in Thailand or in Turkey talking about being away from their families. For those past 2 months when we held up our preseason for the upcoming last season.
How have you been welcomed in China? I mean, you've been there a while now and you've been their leading goal scorer for some time. You've come agonizingly close to promotion to the Super League, but How have you, as a foreign national, I know there's another Zimbabwean player and a Brazilian in the squad too, but what's it been like?
For me, I think the first year, it was one of the years that I thought, you know, going to China, I don't know much about the country, I don't know much about the culture, the league. I thought it was going to be a walk in the park. But you find that when you get to that country, you see that how ignorant we are as a football world, whether it's Europe, whether it's Africa. We always think that in Asia there's no football, but you tend to see that there's a lot of talent. But as I think, for me personally, the welcome has been tremendous. You know, they've welcomed me, in warm hands, and they've, treated me as one of their own.
Could you see more South Africans and fellow African players ending up in China? I know the Super League is very attractive financially. The league you're currently in is just one tier below. Could you see more African and South African players heading that way?
Slowly but surely, the doors will be open for more and more South African players to, leave their comfort zone and, go challenge themselves. Not only the talent, but also themselves, their character and their personality in the Chinese Football League.
Let's take it back to where it started. I mean, you've sacrificed so much to get to where you are today. Those days when you were sleeping at a train station, away from home, worried about your mother in Clarksville, tell us about that.
I didn't care that if I sleep in the train station, people will come and I'll get mugged or something will happen to me, any negative. I had a vision and a dream to become a football star. And God, by God's grace, as I said before, by God's grace, He protected me until I finished the marathon at that particular time when I was going to trials at Platinum Stars, and I was chosen to be one of their players in that year.
Where would you be without football? Do you shudder, or do you have another plan, or was football always the plan?
For me, football has always been the plan. I remember also when we were in grade 11, we had an essay, but we had an oral presentation to present to your classmates, or to say, what do you want to do after, when you finish matric? And I didn't know what to say, but the only thing that I said to my teacher at that particular time and my classmate was like, I want to be a football player.
What does the future hold for you? I mean, 30 years old now, you've recently signed a new deal. Hopefully you want to finish at the Super League. Is there a chance we might see Dino Ndlovu in his twilight finishing here on South African soil?
European football is competitive. If my body cannot carry me anymore to really do what I do best that side, why not? I'll come back home. Whether it's next year, whether it's 2 years from now, what's controlling me is my body. My body is the only cell that can, really determine when will be the best time for me to come back to South Africa.
Elsewhere, Liverpool striker